evangelicalism and DEI. Full details have not been released, but the administration is reportedly looking at California, Colorado, Illinois, and Minnesota. The offices of the governors of all four states say they've not received any communication from the Trump administration about those plans. This is SRN News. At the Winter Olympics, skeleton racer Vladimir Haraskevich is disqualified for wearing a banned tribute helmet portraying fellow Ukrainians killed in the war with Russia.
International Olympic Committee spokesperson Mark Adams says the IOC wants Haraskevich to have his moment, and it feels his grief over the war in Ukraine.
There are 130 conflicts going on in the world. You cannot have 130 different conflicts featured, however terrible they are. You cannot have them featured during the field of play, during the actual competition.
Haraskevich says the IOC's decision plays along with Russian propaganda. Haraskevich was among the fastest in training leading into the Olympic races. I'm Donna Warder.
Chloe Kim will be in the halfpipe later as she tries to become the first snowboarder to win 3 straight Olympic gold medals. Could happen later today. More of these stories at srnnews.com.
In God's Word, the Bible, in Mark chapter 8 and verse 36, we read, "For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" A warning concerning the neglect of our soul's welfare. In God's Word, the Bible, Mark 8:36.
As you correspond with missionaries, be sure to tell them they can listen to VCY America in the country they serve. Simply visit vcyamerica.org and click on radio. That's vcyamerica.org.
VCY America is KVCX Gregory and WVIW Bridgeport. Christian Information Radio.
History was made on today's date. Stay tuned for an American Minute with Bill Federer.
Can you believe it? Abraham Lincoln and Charles Darwin were born on the exact same day, February 12, 1809, but their lives had completely different effects. Lincoln is best known for freeing the slaves by issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, affirming that all men are equal. Darwin is best known for the theory of evolution, arguing that all men are not equal because some are more evolved. Darwin's theory has been used by atheists to explain away belief in God, whereas the last act of Congress signed by Lincoln before he was shot was to place the phrase "In God We Trust" on all our national coin.
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And friends, thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today for another topic and certainly to keep you informed on what is taking place across this nation. It was during the Biden administration that there was really a severe uptick and pressure placed upon businesses, schools, local governments, the entertainment industry, sports, and others to advance the LGBTQ plus agenda. I mean, even the Biden White House on Resurrection Sunday 2024 held a Transgender Day of Visibility at the White House where some very vile things occurred. Well, friends, the tide has turned. Just recently, the Human Rights Campaign, an activist organization that advances the LGBTQ plus movement, released their Corporate Quality Index for 2026. The report shows a sharp decline of Fortune 500 companies from 377 in 2025 to just 131 now, an enormous 65% decline. We're going to get to that today, as well as the other related issues, such as reports of the Gay Days event in Orlando being put on a one-year pause after sponsors dropped out. Tucson, Arizona has canceled their Pride Festival this month and have dissolved their organization. They've been holding this since 1977, one of the nation's longest-standing Pride organizations. And in keeping with the National Park Service policy, the Trump administration has pulled down the Pride flag from the Stonewall National Monument. But first today, we're going to discuss another tragic mass shooting, this time in Canada, by one identifying as transgender. Joining us today, we welcome Peter LaBarbera, who is the founder and president of Center for Morality, Americans for Truth. He's a former reporter for the Washington Times, LifeSiteNews.com, WND.com, and a former contributing editor for Human Events. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks. It's so good to be here.
Let's begin with Canada. Multiple people killed in this mass shooting, believed to be the largest certainly in this province and perhaps in all of Canada. And when this first came out the other night, Peter, they described the shooter as wearing a dress. It just popped in my mind. I wonder if this was someone claiming to be transgender, and sure enough, it was. I'm going to have you comment on this in just a moment, but first of all, a audio clip here from the police who are answering a question as it relates to this person being transgender.
Well, first off, thank you for your question. We're not hiding it. In fact, you're the first media to ask the question. I will say this. We identified the suspect as they chose to be identified in public and in social media. I can say that Jesse was born as a biological male who approximately, the information that I have, approximately 6 years ago began to transition to female and identified as female both socially and publicly.
Peter, your response to the shooting?
Well, you know, it's getting to the point now when you see a mass killing that you're wondering, you're almost presuming that it might be a transgender killer. And we saw, of course, the awful Tennessee mass killing and at the Christian school in Tennessee. And you also can almost bank on there being political correctness when the police and the authorities discuss the killing. They almost seem to have more respect for the trans activism and making sure they're using the politically correct woke pronoun than they are for the victims' families. I mean, it's just preposterous that there's all this sensitivity around how we refer to a sex-confused biological male who's trying to become a woman, which he can never be.
Yeah. I find it interesting, too, that, police referred to this person not as a gunman, but as a gun person. Here's that clip.
That includes the deceased gun person.
Okay. And then separately, do you know the gun person's relationship to the...
You don't want to say gunman, Peter. It's got to be gun person.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And, Jim, at this point, unless we don't get a chance later, it reminds me of what the new Congresswoman from Wyoming, Harriet Hagerman, said. She said, "I don't want to be called cisgender. I am a woman." You know, we have to remember that the gateway to all this radicalism starts with language. They must overturn the language to accomplish their radical goals, so their goals don't appear as radical as they truly are. If you can't call a man, even in these awful circumstances, it's really it's very telling about what kind of evil we're facing here.
Earlier this week, the dissenter put out a question asking, is there a pattern here? And they point to the Denver school shooter. The first one, Devin Erickson, identified as trans. The second individual involved, Maya Alec McKinney, also identified as trans. Aberdeen shooter, Sonochia Mosley, identified as trans. The Nashville shooter, Aubrey Hale, identified as trans. The Iowa shooter, Dylan Butler, identified as gender fluid. Philadelphia shooter, Kimberly Carricker, identified as trans. Colorado Springs shooter, Anderson Lee Aldrich, identified as being non-binary. A couple others are still non-confirmed at this time, but just one other clip I'd like to play here. This is from Tyler O'Neill from the Daily Signal, who called attention to this matter in this report that he had filed.
What drives so many supporters of transgender ideology to violence? The man who allegedly murdered Charlie Kirk had a transgender boyfriend, and that seems to have been crucial to his motivation. He wasn't alone. Let's not forget Minneapolis, Nashville, Highlands Ranch. Most people who identify as transgender do not pose a threat, but some of them do. Some of them have even threatened to target Christian girls in girls' bathrooms, threatening to do unspeakable things to them. What drives this hatred? I'd suggest the rhetoric of the Human Rights Campaign is at least partly to blame. The Human Rights Campaign publishes a report about the epidemic of violence transgender people supposedly face. It claims that violence traces back to anti-trans stigma and discrimination, such that policies preventing men from competing in women's sports or keeping boys out of girls' restrooms are inspiring violence. It lists the deaths of people who identify as transgender, suggesting this data reveals a higher homicide rate than the general population. In reality, however, by HRC's own reckoning, transgender people actually face fewer homicides. Here's a brief review. HRC counted 36 deaths between November 2023 and November 2024. According to the Williams Institute, a pro-transgender think tank HRC has cited in the past, there are approximately 2.8 million people who identify as transgender or non-binary. That yields a rate of 1.29 homicides per 100,000. Every homicide is tragic, but let's look at the homicide rates for other segments of the population. Between November 2023 and November 2024, the FBI counted 3,812 female homicide victims. The Census Bureau puts the female population at 166.5 million. That's a rate of 2.29 homicide victims per 100,000 women. The rate among men for the same time period, 7.86. The rate for whites, 2.72. Blacks, 17.5. Hispanics, 4.2. The DC homicide rate in 2024, 27.3. The overall U.S. homicide rate in 2023, 5.6. In other words, using the Human Rights Campaign's own data, the transgender homicide rate pales in comparison to most homicide rates. This suggests you are actually safer identifying as transgender than not, at least for homicide purposes. Then, if you actually look at the specific cases, you'll find that most of these victims didn't die from gender-motivated attacks. An ex-boyfriend killed Chu Kwan Hamilton, for instance. In some cases, authorities concluded that an HRC-counted homicide may have actually been an accident. Every death is tragic, but it's important to set the record straight. Opposition to transgender ideology isn't the same thing as violence, and it is irresponsible for HRC to suggest that it is. People like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro aren't inspiring deadly violence against transgender people, and the Human Rights Campaign needs to stop suggesting they are.
Okay, that's Tyler O'Neill. And Peter, there's a narrative that is really coming from pro-LGBT organizations that virtually claim that there's an epidemic of violence against transgenders. And as he points out, that is just not the case.
Yeah, and Jim, you and I have been doing this a long time. And this harkens back. Goes back to the gay agenda, the so-called gay agenda, which is organized, proud homosexuality. You probably don't remember this one, Jim, but in 1998 when Matthew Shepard was killed, Human Rights Campaign and other homosexual... Matthew Shepard was a college student who the homosexual lobby got huge propaganda advantage from by saying it was a hate crime. But when he first was killed, he was an openly homosexual college student. They effectively blamed his murder on religious right groups, and they blackened out their screens, their websites in protest, basically saying this was essentially conservative and religious-based homophobia, so-called, and discrimination caused this murder. So they've been at this game a very, very long time. Now it comes to transgenders, and they're using the same tactics they used to claim a fake narrative on the homosexual issue they're doing on the transgender issue. The difference is now you have all these transgender killers, these cases, even when the authorities try to hide it, as in the Tennessee case, when they wouldn't release Audrey Hale's her manifesto, which had all this transgender stuff in it. They dragged it. They would not release that to the public. It had to be pushed out through including legal action. So this narrative they've been at this a long time, and it's always the same game. The violence stems from the radical ideology and the radical ideas emanating from the LGBTQ movement. You cannot blame it on conservatives or Christians.
Yeah. Well, Peter, let's get to this corporate equality index put out by the Human Rights Campaign. And matter of fact, Tyler O'Neill referred to HRC. You've been following the actions of this organization a long time. Who exactly is the HRC?
Okay, HRC is the most powerful and quote-unquote successful homosexual, bisexual, transgender, and now they call themselves queer activist group. They have the Human Rights Campaign, which gives major donations almost entirely to Democrats. I don't think there's hardly any Republicans, if any, that get PAC money from the Human Rights Campaign. It's very much a pro-Democrat organization. In fact, Democrats running for major offices, including president, like Kamala Harris, invariably they speak before the Human Rights Campaign galas and dinners. They also have a nonprofit. That branch, HRC, is not tax-exempt, but they have a tax-exempt branch called the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, which publishes the Corporate Equality Index, which is the report which attempts to basically browbeat corporations into adhering to gay and trans activist policies by rating them and scoring them.
So we're going to get into this Corporate Equality Index, but we're just a few seconds from the break. We're talking today with Peter LaBarbera, founder and president of the Center for Morality and also Americans for Truth. And we will take a break. We'll come back. We'll get more into this matter as well as other matters happening in the country right now as it relates to the LGBTQ issue, as the tide has turned against this movement. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, some animals have been around for a long time, haven't they?
Indeed they have, Chris. Actually, from a biblical perspective, when God created the various kinds of animals in Genesis 1, he intended those kinds to survive and continue into the present. Some have gone extinct and some have adapted and changed somewhat, but the basic kinds are still the same. Evolutionists, on the other hand, are confused by what they call persistent fossils, where one organism in the fossil record dated at millions of years old is identical to the same organism alive today. This lack of change is not what evolution would predict. Examples of persistent fossils are numerous, including the horseshoe crab and the ant, etc., etc. Face it, Chris, evolution doesn't happen, but creation, now that did happen back in Genesis.
For more on creation, visit our website at icr.org.
Peter LaBarbera with us today here on Crosstalk from the Center for Morality, and talking about the tide turning against the LGBTQ plus movement. And the Human Rights Campaign just released their 2026 Corporate Equality Index, and showing a sharp decline of Fortune 500 companies from 377 in 2025 to just 131 now. I believe that's who had their 100% ranking, but that's a huge decline, some 65%. And Peter, I know that year after year after year, they have boasted the names of those companies and have shamed those who do not measure up to their 100%. So tell us about this index, and what was some of the criteria that companies are measured against and expected to fulfill?
Well, Jim, as we've talked about many times, I think, on the show over the years, basically the racket, and it is a racket, it's an influence game that the HRC has played very successfully until now. What they do is every couple of years they change their criteria, and they make their criteria more and more radical, which is generally the tendency of anybody on the left. Everything always becomes more radical, more extreme. And so now, under the current policy, you would include, this is for a company to get a 100% rating. For example, a Fortune 500 company would have to pay for the so-called gender transition care, which is essentially these awful procedures. Let's say you have a man who decides he is a woman, that's his new gender identity. The company, under its so-called health care, would pay for that man to undergo basically mutilations to his God-given body to have the body that he thinks he should have, and which of course is pure evil. And they're in one of their criteria under the Human Rights Campaign, this Corporate Equality Index, is that companies must pay for this like it's like you're caring for somebody who had a heart attack, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
So let's think about the implications of that. Again, the language they use, they call it care, gender-affirming care. And by the way, they apply the same language to young people. Human Rights Campaign has fought for young people, minors, to have the, quote, access to gender-affirming care. We're talking about this, what has basically ignited the opposition of the vast majority of Americans now oppose any sort of gender, so-called gender procedures, which would include mutilations of sex organs, or taking hormones. That would be a young boy, maybe a 14-year-old boy, taking estrogen, a female hormone, to actually grow breasts, etc. The American people have turned against this, and that's why the LGBT movement is so in trouble, because it is so grotesque. It is so against what is good and what is common sense and what is right, that the very notion that this is happening has become like a 90-10 or an 80-20 issue in the public. That is 80 to 90% oppose these procedures being pushed on young people, and now we're actually seeing young people starting to win lawsuits, Jim. I think we had our first lawsuit victory of, I think it was a girl who was trying to become a boy, and she argues that she was rushed into it, and she won the first lawsuit. And we'll see many more of these lawsuits. Mm-hmm. So this is the kind of policies that the Human Rights Campaign pushes on companies. And up to this point, up to the last couple of years, they've been winning because the companies they would always brag about getting 100% ranking. Well, then came Elon Musk and social media, and a guy named Robbie Starbuck, who's on X, has hundreds of thousands of followers, and he began taking conservative companies, for example, what's one? Tractor Supply, and saying, why is Tractor Supply, I think that's the name of the company, all in for this radical LGBT agenda, including this extreme transgender agenda. And Robbie Starbuck took the lead on this, and he got several companies to pull back. And now we're seeing a bunch of companies not even participating in the Corporate Equality Index, which is the scorecard. We're seeing a number of companies now pulling out because they can't win. If they don't get 100% or they backtrack from their perfect rating, then they get bashed by the gay and the trans activists, and so they're choosing the course of just not participating in the index at all, which is a great thing because the index is the power tool that has built HRC to be able to pressure not just American companies but companies all over the world, because every year they ratchet up the criteria, and one of them now is, Jim, that a company has to push these same agendas on all its affiliates. It's
their
all
suppliers.
over the world.
Yep.
They have to push the same agenda.
Yeah, and push it on their suppliers and do business with suppliers that equal that agenda. And at the same time, Peter, they penalize companies that do other things, such as if they would make a contribution to an organization that it doesn't have the LGBTQ equality or works against it, some moral, family-minded group, they would be dock points for this.
Yeah, absolutely. If a company said they're going to give $100,000 to WVCY America, they would be docked 25 points in the Corporate Equality Index, meaning they couldn't get that coveted 100% ranking. And it's just incredibly insidious, because the language that they use when you read the report is, they make very professional sounding language. They talk about best practices. But Jim, we have to remember also, Human Rights Campaign, the more I study it, it is a truly evil organization. For example, and this is the corporation, I mean, HRC is what the companies are working with. A few years ago, right before the election, I believe, Human Rights Campaign endorsed and participated in a movie that claimed that Abraham Lincoln, one of our most revered presidents, was likely a bisexual. I'm in the weird business of monitoring these guys, so I actually went to see that film. It was had the word Lovers of Men, it was called. In the movie, Jim, it has Abraham Lincoln in bed with another man.
Oh, my.
You know, this is a so-called documentary which Human Rights Campaign was a part of. So this evil left-wing homosexual, bisexual, transgender, so-called queer activist organization has the supposed authority to drive these human rights HR professionals all over the country are like following it like it's some kind of noble authority, when actually it's a hard left organization which gives almost exclusively in the political world gives to Democrats like Kamala Harris. It's very far left. But now they've been exposed, and Human Rights Campaign is taking a beating. And I think it's like the Wizard of Oz. Remember in the Wizard of Oz movie when they find out that the Wizard of Oz was just a man? People are seeing that this is just a left-wing Democrat organization. We don't have to follow what they want and demand every time.
But Peter, we want to point out, though, the pressure that they have placed on businesses has been enormous, and they don't just tolerate neutrality in all of this. Matter of fact, because some companies just say, no, we just want to stay neutral on this. We don't want to say anything. And I'm looking at this year's report, and they say silence is not neutrality. It's a choice, and that choice can become a future liability for business. When companies go quiet about their inclusive commitments, workers feel abandoned. And just saying that silence, it's not neutrality.
Yeah, Jim, I was struck by that same sentence. I guess we're very much alike because I said silence. So a company can't just be neutral.
Right.
Well, let me take just a shot here at HRC's so-called neutrality. Their president, and I can't remember her name, Kelly Robinson, and their organization celebrated Don Lemon when Don Lemon went with left-wing BLM, Black Lives Matter activists, into a St. Paul church and invaded a church service for which now people have been arrested. Human Rights Campaign took the side of the protesters who went into the church. This is the type of organization it is. It should never have had any kind of authority, but because businesses are so, and HR departments tend to be very much on the left and not even neutral, they often followed this. But now, because of, I have to give Elon Musk credit, because X is out there, and millions of people can now find out when, for example, learning that Travelers Corporations, Travelers Insurance, is very pro-LGBT, and they brag about getting the 100% rating. The more and more people are finding out about this, and they're taking action, and the companies are being forced to respond to the will of the people, and drop this kowtowing to this homosexual, bisexual, transgender activist group.
They also say in this report, 40% of U.S. workers reported that their employer had reduced, rebranded, or eliminated at least one DEI-related practice in the past year. So again, friends, the tide is turning here. And we should also point out, Peter, that the HRC, they've gone to great lengths to promote what they call gender diversity in the workplace, and they even have a trans toolkit for employers. Comes complete with a gender identity and expression in the workplace checklist, dress codes, gender neutral, to be gender neutral, a template for gender transition guidelines, having a transgender in the employee resource group. Businesses should join the rising tide. I mean, they have been all in on trying to put this pressure on businesses.
Absolutely, Jim. And you know what? I didn't read the transgender toolkit, even though I think I told you about it.
Yeah.
By mistake, I printed out the HRC transgender patients. They're also pressuring hospitals, and by the way, they're pressuring governments, Jim. They pressure civil, like city governments. But I printed out the transgender patients' hospital policies, and HRC and other homosexual organizations are saying that one of the things they're demanding for transgender patients is if there's a gender-specific room, like for patients, in other words, rooms for women only, they're demanding that a transgender, I guess they would call it a transgender woman, but it's actually a man pretending to be a woman even if he still has biological male genitalia, they must, the hospital, to honor this code, they must put him in with women, in the women's room, despite having male genitalia. And they're saying that's for the dignity of the transgender person. Right. Well, what about the rights of the woman?
Mm-hmm.
That's
exactly.
what they don't care about. They don't care about women. They don't care about women's privacy. This is the kind of organization Human Rights Campaign is. That's why I call it the Human Wrongs Campaign.
And friends, again, that's from their report that they are, showing the great decline that is taking place. And Peter, what we're seeing is that corporations across this country are really coming to their senses in what they have been promoting. And the corporate sponsorships have been in great decline in many local organizations as well. I see, for instance, the Tucson Pride Festival. They announced that they were canceling. I believe it's normally February of every year, but they've been operating since 1977. They're one of the longest-running so-called pride organizations, and they not only are canceling Tucson Pride, but according to a report as well from KOLD, Peter, they are just disbanding. They are closing up shop.
Yeah, this is just great news, because what there was basically a corporate slush fund for gay and trans activists. And and nobody really knew about it, Jim. Let's face it, the average person doesn't go around thinking, wow, what is Home Depot sponsoring? Or, these cases got out when we were doing the work 10, 20, 30 years ago. We tried to get it out, but now there's a mass platform, and nobody believes the media. We know the media sponsors. In fact, the media marches in these pride parades, Jim. I used to cover the media marching in gay pride parades. So you can't trust the media, but you can trust these accounts which are exposing the truth.
Friends, we're going to take a quick break, and we've got more to share with you here in our next segment as well. Peter LaBarbera is with us, and we will be back in 1 minute here on Crosstalk, as indeed the tide is turning against the LGBTQ plus movement. Back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
Pastor Ken Spilger was discouraged. His church was not growing like he desired, and he wanted God to do something. He was invited to fly to a pastor's conference. On the way back, the plane hit trees just short of the runway. It crashed and erupted into a fireball. The pilot and 2 other pastors were killed instantly. Ken Spilger was the sole survivor of the crash and was pulled from the burning wreckage of the plane. He spent months at a hospital's burn unit. Ken's story is documented in Pulled from the Burning, a powerful documentary that shows how God changed his life, his family, and his church. Pulled from the Burning is available for a donation of $15. The set includes a Blu-ray disc, a DVD, and a digital download. For Pulled from the Burning, call VCY America, 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Peter LaBarbera is with us today, and by the way, his website, americansfortruth.org, americansfortruth.org, and can stay abreast of some of the things Peter's writing about or reporting on, americansfortruth.org. Peter, one other thing on this corporate equality index put out by the Human Rights Campaign, every year they have been putting the names of the companies, and you see their ratings, and boasting of those companies with 100%, and really, I think it was to shame companies that didn't get that 100% rating, and listing, and I believe even some that had 0 ratings they would tell you about. But what's noticeably absent from this year's report, they're not listing these companies any longer.
Yeah, Jim, and just to reiterate what you said earlier in the show, the reason is that so many employers, so many companies have chosen to not publicly document their practices. According to the report, the 2026 report, it says, quote, fewer employers chose to publicly document their practices through CEI, which is the Corporate Equality Index, submissions in 2026, including a 65% decline among Fortune 500 companies. So, I've been doing this for many years, Jim, and we've talked about it. They used to have all the companies listed. At one point, they even had the criteria next to each company and which ones they weren't following. And it's exactly what the purpose, exactly what you said, to shame these companies. And now they're not even listing them. So this is going to continue happening, and I think people like Robbie Starbuck will continue to expose these corporations, because there's still a lot of bad corporations doing bad things, Jim. I mean, I just learned that GoDaddy, which is my website, I use for my website, names, is 100% company. So there's still a lot of bad companies out there who are just have the 100% rating.
Peter, let's talk about another significant matter, and I'm looking at an article from Not the Bee, and also LGBTQ Nation covered the matter of Disney Gay Days canceling their 35th anniversary event. Matter of fact, from Not the Bee, they indicate they've been holding this since the early 1990s, but this year canceling the annual Pride event, evidently losing a lot of sponsorship, corporate sponsorship for this as well. I guess one person is saying, no, we're not canceling it, and say more information coming, but others are saying, no, they're giving a one-year pause. I don't know where it's going to end up totally, but just the fact that headline would even occur says there's trouble.
Yeah, this is just fantastic news, Jim. For so many years, the companies have kowtowed to these very far left-wing, mainly pro-Democrat Party. Remember, you have to remember that about these homosexual activist groups. And they've been kowtowing and giving them just unbelievable amounts of money. I remember I went to New York City, or I think we talked about this one, Jim, when Walmart went to its first so-called Pride Parade in New York City, and I witnessed nudity in front of children at that parade. And this has been going on for a long time, but now sunlight, the exposure of social media, sunlight is a great disinfectant, and we're seeing companies being exposed, and average people are able to easily find out that the companies that they give their money to, spend their money on, are supporting this radical agenda.
Yeah. Well, things are happening, Peter. You made reference to this earlier, but there's an article from Mass Resistance that talks about a library in Wyoming, in Campbell County, Wyoming, one of the most conservative areas of the state. And this library started bringing in explicit sexual, homosexual, transgender books for children and teens. And I'm not even going to talk about what they include in these books because it's so vile. But evidently, Peter, that this lawsuit was filed, and the insurance company just decided to pay out rather than fight it.
Yeah, this is just an extraordinary story, and Mass Resistance just does tremendous work. You can see their website at massresistance.org. But this is, I've visited many libraries, and I think most libraries carry these books, and I think the most dangerous ones they're talking about are the ones promoting so-called gender transitions and to very young children. Jim, I've seen books for toddlers. I've seen cardboard books which talk about, you're a little you're a toddler boy. You don't have to be a boy. You can decide your own gender identity. This sort of garbage, and it's pure evil, being foisted on kids in libraries. And what the Mass Resistance story is about is a bunch of citizens took issue and said, look, we're asking our library board to stop promoting this evil to our children. And they basically won, after which one leftist dissenter on the board, who they had to fire. She said she wasn't going to enforce the new policy when a new library board was elected, a more conservative board. Then after she was fired by the board, she sued them, and the insurance company for the library is Travelers Insurance, and rather than fight this ridiculous lawsuit, which Mass Resistance says could have been defended by just any good lawyer, rather than fight this harassment lawsuit, they caved and awarded this leftist librarian a $700,000 award. And then the gay activists, the LGBTQ activists, came and said, "Oh, look, this is what happens when you quote unquote censor books." So the narrative of the left is we're banning books. And what they don't want to talk about is that these are terrible books, and a library board in each locale gets to decide which books they're going to promote. They don't have to promote books that would push racist ideas on children, or Nazism, or polygamy on children. Why do they have to carry books which promote evil gender ideology on very young children?
Yeah. Well, Peter, let's hit another issue, and that's let's go next now to New York. And here we have, and I'm looking at the Washington Stand, the Stonewall National Monument located in Manhattan's Greenwich Village has become the epicenter of LGBT-related symbolism. It was designated by President Obama as a national monument and part of the National Park Service. Well, when the Trump administration came along, they said, we're not going to allow flags of any variety to be at national monuments. Only the U.S. flag or the POW MIA flag are permitted. And as a result, just coming down from flying is the so-called pride flag over New York. Mayor Donnie is just outraged by this. He said, "I'm outraged by the removal of the rainbow pride flag from Stonewall National Monument. New York is the birthplace of the modern LGBTQ plus rights movement, and no active erasure will ever change or silence that history. Our city has a duty not just to honor this legacy, but to live up to it. I will always fight for a New York City that invests in our LGBTQ plus community, defends their dignity, and protects every one of our neighbors without exception." Now, Peter, this is a universal decision on all U.S. Park Service locations not to fly anything but the U.S. or the POW MIA flag, and that includes this that was made into a national park as well by the Obama administration. And there's outrage happening as a result of this. But, I certainly applaud the Trump administration for taking this stand.
Yeah, this is a great thing. If all the rainbow flags have to come down, then they have to come down at this one. Of course, we would oppose this being held in the status of a national landmark in the first place. I mean, the Stonewall Inn is where there was basically an anti-cop riot in which cops could have been killed. I read one account where somebody was almost going to throw a match, or maybe they did throw a match into a bar that was basically run by the mafia, by the way, a homosexual bar, and the cops were locked in the building by these activists, and people could have been killed. It was an anti-police riot, but that's another issue for another day, how the Democrats have made homosexual activism as if it's part of the great American story, where it's actually part of the decline of America, that we're celebrating something that God calls not just a sin, but an abomination, Jim. Homosexuality, the celebration of proud homosexuality, is a great offense against our Creator, and yet America is now celebrating it. But this is great news. The Trump administration has taken acts like this. Remember, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary of War, took Harvey Milk, a homosexual activist, took his name off a ship in which I think the Democrats started it. It might have been Obama started it, to put Harvey Milk's name on a Navy ship where he was a homosexual activist and actually had a pedophilic relationship with a teenage boy when he was in his 30s. Why should that evil person's name be on one of our ships? But Trump took it off.
Yeah.
So this is a good thing.
The LGBTQ Nation is reporting that the Manhattan Borough President, Brad Hoylman-Seigel, said that they're going to try and re-raise this rainbow flag, but he said we may be prevented from re-raising the flag, but if we don't seize this moment and this outrage, I think we'll let down generations of queer activists, end of quote. Wow.
Well, let's just hope that the law is applied equally, or at least the order is applied equally. And, there's a lot of symbolism going on now on the left. They're trying to make Trump out to be, this great monster. And, of course, we see this not just among the LGBTQ activists, but among all the activists on the left. They're doing their best to demonize President Trump, but he has done a lot of good things that have helped a lot of people. And I've been surprised at how much he's done on the LGBTQ issue. I wish now he would just go the whole step and say, hey, let's get behind the repeal of the Obergefell decision, which put homosexual so-called marriage, a Supreme Court decision, made it, quote-unquote, legal. as marriage in the United States.
Friends, if you'd like to start getting online on these issues, our number is 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. Peter, just on the matter of sports, we see this happening, and this comes from OANN.com. And that is amid intensifying federal scrutiny, a number of high-stakes legal battles, a male student athlete secured first place in the girls' triple jump at the 2026 Athletics California Winter Championship this past Saturday. A.B. Hernandez, a senior at the school, secured first place in the girls' triple jump, though biologically a boy. I don't know how you even feel good about that, but that is continuing to happen, where competition is really stripping the females of what is rightly due them.
Yeah, as a father of 2 girls and 3 boys, I'm just outraged that this is happening. But I think, and I hope and pray that this will be on its way out, because there hopefully will be legal consequences for this act, what happened here. And the tide has turned. The American people are decidedly against biological males, be they boys or men, participating in women or girls' sports. It deprives women of their right to compete fairly. And I can't believe it's still going on, but the left can't let go of this. And, Jim, I think this is an appropriate point to say the Democrats can't let go of this either. You would think the Democratic Party, there would be more people in the leadership positions who would say, okay, we need to jettison, for now at least, this transgender issue because it's very unpopular. But no, the Democrats are sticking with this transgender lunacy. And I think this is a great opportunity for other parties, be they Republican or whoever, to take advantage of the Democrats going all in to this day on this trans agenda.
Peter LaBarbera with us here today. We're going to take a quick break. And friends, I'll remind you from 1 Corinthians chapter 6, where it says, "Know ye not the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind." It goes on to say, "Such were some of you, but you are washed, you are sanctified, justified in the name of the Lord Jesus by the Spirit of our God." Oh, there is a change from this lifestyle available, and that comes in a relationship with Jesus Christ. We'll be back in just one moment. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewreport.com. Recently, I completed an article entitled 27 Steps by Enemies Foreign and Domestic to Collapse America from Within. Folks, it's taken me the 36 years of work and research to compile this list of 27 historical steps, and I hope you'll go and read it. It's available right now at worldviewtimes.com, worldviewtimes.com. This is important because, as Francis Schaeffer said, many people can see the world in bits and pieces, but not as a big puzzle. Many Americans, and sadly many Christians, are not aware that all of these things we're watching unfold are connected. Whether it's the attack on law enforcement and our military, whether it's the open borders, the infiltration of Marxianity in our churches, the NGOs and other groups that are making partnerships with the government, it's all connected to bring down America from within.
Peter LaBarbera with us here today. The tide is turning against the LGBTQ movement. And we're seeing that even through the Corporate Equality Index that is put out by the Human Rights Campaign. I mean, they're the ones who have been pressuring and pushing businesses to go this direction, and they print their names year after year. This year, such a sharp decline. I think that they had thoughts otherwise. Let's begin our calls. Ron is calling from Tri-Cities, Washington. Ron, you're on the air.
Yes, I commend Mr. LaBarbera for standing up to these degenerates. But I just wanted to remind people that some of the biggest assault is coming from the churches. I have an article here from the Christian Post. Liberal Protestant churches proclaim the holiness of transgenderism, and they rebuke any pastor who opposes it, and he calls it sinful to oppose transgenderism. I think our fight is right inside the walls of the church.
Thank
you.
you.
That's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comment, Peter.
Absolutely. You know, these are social clubs. These are not Christian churches. They maybe call themselves churches, but if you're fighting against God and His Word, you are not a true church.
Let us go to Eddie in Kentucky. You're on the air.
Hey, Jim, thank you for taking my call. I appreciate the program so much. We've got to get this out of the classroom. I mean, it's like having a boat with a hole in it. You need to stop the leak.
Yeah.
This needs to be thrown out of the schools just like a bag of trash be thrown in the dump. I got in this world because of a mother and a father, and there's not one single transgender person that didn't get in this world the same way. And it's just promoting lies, perversion. But until we stop it going in our schools, we're never going to gain no ground. I think it'll be shut down. And our schools need to have a good cleaning. But look, they don't have to teach a Bible. They don't have to teach Christianity. Just teach those children how to read, write, and do arithmetic. And I tell you, I believe our country could be blessed again. Thank you, Brother Jim.
Thank you, Eddie, for your call. Peter, to comment on the schools, because this has been the breeding ground for so many young people who have made this transition, keeping information from parents. That's really coming from the Education Association, is it not?
Absolutely, and Jim, and this has been one of the saddest things about fighting this movement is that we've seen a general rise among young people and Gen Z, and the percentage of young people who identify as LGBTQ. I think now it's well over. They're saying Gallup polls saying I think it's over 23%. I don't have the exact figure in my mind, Jim, but to think that 1 in 5 young people is identifying as either deviant sexually or in this so-called gender non-conforming, which is basically deviance and departing from, Jesus quoted Genesis in Matthew 19. God made them male and female from the beginning of creation. So this is very sad, but it's worked. But now the youngest generation, interestingly, is becoming more conservative, and we're seeing more young people want to go to church, read the Bible. So hopefully we are seeing a revival, and it's going to be a lasting one.
And let's go next to Greg in Minnesota. Greg, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. I question Mom Donnie. I mean, with him being a Muslim, isn't it hypocritical for him to support the gay movement?
Well, can I answer that one, Jim?
Go ahead.
Oh, yes. This is one of the most intriguing things about the left Marxist, the Marxist Muslim coalition. You have Muslim activists, and Mandami is one, and communists aligning, even though Islam, as we know, they have the most draconian in the most fundamentalist Islam nations, the most draconian penalties against homosexuality. And so they're uniting all against basically conservative Christians, essentially. And what happens is, I think it was in Hamtramck, Michigan, when the Muslim won, I can't remember who it was. I think it was the mayor or a councilman in Hamtramck, Michigan, a Muslim one. And then after that, they weren't as solicitous of the homosexual transgender lobbying group. So they're going to be fighting at one point, but right now they're unifying, and they're mainly in the Democratic Party, and Mandami is the face of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Kind of like when they get the upper house.
Yeah, similar, very similar. Thank you. Let's go next to Shannon calling to us as well. Hi, Shannon. You're on the air.
Hey, yeah, it's real important what you were mentioning about just the whole manipulation of language, the whole linguistic aspect. Like this word fairness, right? It sounds so benign to the public, but like what that translates to is we'll be fair to you so long as you publicly agree with us. I think that's what Dave Chappelle was referring to as the rainbow mafia, the LGBTQ mafia, the way they blackmail people just so they'll maintain like social standing. But the main reason I wanted to call was I would appreciate if y'all would address our governor, who seems to be a genuinely decent man, except he's definitely all along, he's been all out loud and proud for the whole transgender kids is the term they use, gender-affirming care. And I don't know if you were aware, just a couple days ago, he was on The View. I think he's positioning himself for a presidential run, and he was saying that his religion requires him to support the whole transgender movement. That's just that's a heresy. And I'm assuming he's getting funding from the Fairness Campaign. I haven't had a chance to research that, but I would assume that's the case.
You're referring to Washington?
I'm here in Kentucky talking about Andy Bashir.
Oh, okay.
Andy Bashir, like I say, he was just on the national TV, positioning himself for a presidential run, presumably, and just once again saying that his religion requires him to affirm this, this whole transgender movement.
Great. Thank you for the call, Peter. We've got half a minute left. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is the religious left, and we just have to keep reminding people that this is ridiculous and preposterous. The Bible says, Jesus, quoting Genesis again, but from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. There is no way to biblically justify such a position, and we have to come back to the truth because the truth always wins in the end.
And truth is found in the Scriptures, friends. Go there, and you'll find that there is hope, there is help, there is healing, there is forgiveness that is found for each one who turns to Jesus Christ. And, Peter, one does not need to stay stuck in this lifestyle.
Absolutely not, Jim. And there are tons and tons of detransitioners, people who've walked away from that trans identity, and many of them are believers.
Peter, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Jim.
Peter is LaBarbera with us here today. The website is americansfortruth.org. That's americansfortruth.org. Friends, thanks for joining us here today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.